All right. So the question that Gene asked Tucker, where are the grown-ups? I submit to you is the most articulate this story has been about its character's primary want um, so far. And having pursued it, right? Having pursued whatever it is about grown-ups that she is in need of, and struck out twice, right? Um, we could say three times. Mr. Munson, who's supposed to be there and isn't, the father who can't be bothered to deal with her on the phone or apparently otherwise, um, the mother who can't be responsible for much. So three times she has failed to get what she's needed, circumstantially, but otherwise as well. So she makes another attempt, right? This is the third active attempt, and by way of this prank call. And so let it not be lost on us, right? Although I don't want to suggest it's as simple as it may seem, that the person she chooses to call is named Mr. Love. Um, it can't be as simple as that, right? Um, I, anyway, would be very bothered if it were. But so the first job that she has when she calls him, pages 8 and 9, mostly 9, is to keep him on the phone, right? This is the third effort, and by God, she's not going to get what she wants, but unless she can get him somehow hooked, right? Sustained conversation. So she does that by promising him, right, that he's won something. Um, and on the bottom of page 10, um, she gives up, having kept him on the phone sufficiently long. She admits that I'm a prankster, right, as she puts it. A little bit of Mickey Rooney or something there. Well, you're not the first to make top of page 11. You're not the first to make a fool out of me, and I suppose you won't be the last. Mr. Love says in response to the question that she's asked him on page 10, and I will read this, right? Here's the question, Mr. Love. I lie and steal and sleep around. What do you think about that? Now, the veracity of the claim presented as a question is up for grabs a little bit, at least a little bit. But she has presented to Mr. Love in this prank phone call the conditions that would be the outcome of if the story went the wrong way, if Gene's life went the wrong way. Something like this is the outcome, right? And lie and steal and sleep around. So we've seen some of this, and we know that she's alert to the matter of adultery, right? So that finds a way into, if nowhere else, right, into this prank call. Well, you're not the first to make a fool out of me, Mr. Love said, and I suppose you won't be the last. I don't actually sleep around, Gene said. He said, you should learn some concern for other people. Do you go to church? Right? So you see at this point how the sort of casual business of that paragraph in which she thinks, immediately, reflexively suspects what Mr. Munson is doing because he's an adult is committing adultery. But it's not accidental, right? It's built into Gene's character in some way that we don't understand at this point. But this point meaning page 11. But we know it's there, and we also know that Woolf is going to somehow make further use of it, right? It's not some dangling detail. So he says on 11, you need to learn some concern for other people. Do you go to church? Right? There's so much to say. I'll back up in a moment. Her response to this is no, sir. Sometimes back home we used to, but not here. Only once on Easter. The priest didn't even give a sermon. All he did was play a tape of a baby being born with whale sounds in the background. So they're definitely in California. Jean waited for Mr. Love's reaction. He didn't seem to have one. I don't actually sleep around, Jean repeated. Just with one of my teachers. He's married. Before carrying that further, let me just point out two things. One is when Mr. Love, he's on the phone, right? So he's the first adult to be present with her, and she's done him some damage, right, by way of her question, by way of her promising a gift that she can't deliver on, and by way of this question she's asked that puts him on the spot. She immediately begins to sort of, having recognized that, to dial it down a bit. And the part she dials down is the sleeping around part. And I point that out for a couple of reasons. One is this business of veracity, which we'll return to because we have to. But the other is that item of three things, lie, steal, right, sleep around. One of them she has a moral problem with, a reflexive moral problem with. And so she subtracts that from the list of crimes, right? But when Mr. Love doesn't react, right, in this latter paragraph, she not only brings it back onto the list, but extends it, right? Becomes particularizing about it. Just with one of my teachers. He's married. Married, Mr. Love said. That's terrible. How old are you? He thinks I'm brilliant, Jean said. Brilliant and seductive. This is hilarious. He kept staring at me in class. The next thing I knew, he was writing poems in the back of my essays. And that's how it started. He's hopelessly in love with me, but I couldn't care less. I'm just playing him along. Want to return to the church bit for a second, right? Before getting all excited about Mr. Hopkins again. She's asked, do you go to church? And her response to that is tonally different from anything previous in the story. No, sir, right? So she's beginning to get some, in that moment, this is what I'm after, in that moment, that inverted status has returned to its sort of default mode, in which the children are subordinate to the adults, right? And all it took was an adult to act like an adult. Patterns are valuable because they can be broken, right? Establish the pattern so that you can break them. Adults suck, adults suck, adults suck. Oh, here's an adult acting like an adult, right? And then she describes the church in California, right? And she refers to, remember she referred to her mother's apartment as her mother's apartment, but where her father is, right, is back home. And return to that photograph of Mr. Munson, and here's my argument that it's a metonymy. So metonymy being a detail that stands for the whole, right? When somebody calls you on the telephone, you don't answer the person calling you, you answer the phone, right? And that's a sort of shorthanded way, a metonymy for saying, you know, what would take otherwise a good bit longer to say, I'm answering the person calling me on this device, right? So the snow, I'm arguing, is metonymy. It doesn't need to be acknowledged as such by the story, but it works as one because there is a back home for Jean as there was with Mr. Munson. And also, although this isn't yet present, Mr. Munson's having a photograph of his wife on his desk indicates or suggests an intact family, which Jean is bereft of, all of which would make her think of her father back home as opposed to my mother's apartment, intact family, which, is also about being back there and not here, right? Back there in time as well as in place, and not here in time as well as in place. So the bottom of page 11, right, second half of page 11, she elaborates in Cathy-like fashion, I want to suggest, on this wildness with this depravity with Mr. Hopkins, and and the way she mocks him, and the live fast, die young tattoo, which could not, if she's still alive, it hasn't held up well, I'm sure, but so be it. Page 12. So she has gotten him on pages 10 and 11, gotten him sort of worked up about what we ought to be a little bit worried about, which is she's headed for this wrong path, right? And she responded so well when he said authoritatively, in adult-like fashion, "Do you go to church?" "No, sir," right? Back home we used to. When he's at a loss for words, and she's elaborated this story, right, about her depravity, the wrong track, the not hoped for track, mad world that she could be headed toward, and he doesn't respond adequately. On the top of 11, nope. On the top of 12, right? Jean says what it is that she wants Mr. Love to say. And if you bear in mind that Mr. Love is the first of now 4 adults to have given her any time, right? Any attention at all. She has the greatest opportunity to be articulate about what she wants. And the very top of page 12, I'm suggesting, is where she is articulate. Bawl me out. That's what she wants him to do. Put me back in line, right? Reestablish this order that adults and children have, right, or ought to have in a normal, functioning circumstance, not the one that I'm in. Bawl me out. And he isn't able to, right? Characterologically isn't able to. And then Mr. Munson returns. And there's some good stuff here. With my eye on the clock, I want to sort of fast forward to the most important moment here. Mr. Munson comes in. He's damaged himself on the ice, right? His frivolous little exercise has not played out especially well, but he's making good on the circumstantial problem that Jean has, which is she needs a ride home, right? And is relying on him for a ride home. He's gotten her a cab, but she rejects that. A cab, right? How could you? Don't look at me like that, right? I look like the goddamn spirit of 76. You don't look that bad. Why is she offended by the cab, right? Because the cab, although it does the work of solving her circumstantial problem, her being alone in the theater after midnight at 15 years old, gets her back home where she belongs. It doesn't do the other work of an adult taking responsibility for her, right? Either for bawling her out or just making good on a promise. One more installment coming.